Hey guys, welcome to Creating Creators Podcast. On today's episode, I had a chance to sit down and talk with Jared Brashier. I've been following Jared for a while. He's got a really unique sort of story and pathway that he has sort of followed in the world of video and content creation. He currently is a 3D artist who creates a lot of video work for supplement brands specifically, and really does some incredible work in Cinema 4D as well as some of the other 3D modeling programs. Jared's conversation was really interesting, and I feel like in a lot of ways maybe I learned a lot, and then there were some things definitely that were just way over my head. But I really did enjoy this conversation, and I think you will as well. Check it out. I'm really excited to have you on today's episode of Creating Creators Podcast. I've been following you and Aaron Wilhite for about the same amount of time. I understand the two of y'all shared an office together for a period of time. So where are you located currently?
So currently I'm in Birmingham again. Thank you for having me on, first of all.
Yeah.
I grew up in Huntsville and then lived in Birmingham for like 3 years. And then I spent the last year in Texas, and I just got back to Birmingham, I guess like 6 weeks ago. So I live in the Denham building, like right off 65.
Yeah. I got
right by
you.
Regents Field.
Well, I do have to say right off the bat that your work, I've watched your videos on multiple occasions, but your work is super intimidating to me. Like it blows my mind when I see you do things. And I'm sure people that work with Blender or 3D rendering in general, I'm sure those people are used to seeing these things. But every time you do these videos, it just blows my mind. First of all, that the software does, as there goes my thumbs up icon. But first of all, that the software does what it actually does. And then secondly, just how simply you seem to, roll through this stuff. And I do want to get more into your history and how you got into it. But first, if you don't mind, just sort of tell us a little bit of just who you are, and then we'll get into sort of your journey eventually. But I just wanted to say first and foremost, I respect the crap out of what you do.
Thank you.
And I can't do it at all. So
yeah, I watched like half of each episode with Dustin, Harrison, and Aaron before this, just so I knew like kind of what your questioning style was. And I knew from those, I was like, what is he even going to ask me? Like there's nothing here that like we could even, pull from that's the same thing. But yeah, no, I appreciate it. It is kind of a crazy thing. Basically what I do is I do commercials all in like the visual effects space. So I don't use cameras. Everything that I do is done in 3D space. I create products. I do camera animations. I do all kinds of crazy effects. Basically, if you've ever seen like, maybe most people listening would at least know what renderings are. If you've ever seen any sort of just computer generated imagery of a product, basically I do that, but like all kinds of different stuff with them.
Yeah. Well, like I was saying, I was watching a video earlier. I'll go ahead and pull this up just before we get into some of the slides and stuff. But like this stuff. Well, let me mute it. I don't want that going through right now. But like this 3D rendering, and specifically like the textures that are put on this render, just sort of blows my mind. Even the fact that I think for this one specifically, which from what I understand, this is actually on YouTube, at least what you've got public, this is like your most watched video. And it's focusing all on sort of how to apply these textures to a 3D model. But it blows my mind how many textures are used to just simply create this look.
Yeah. I honestly, I people get on me a lot because I haven't kept up with my YouTube channel. So I don't actually know what my most viewed video is, but it wouldn't be surprising if it's something like simple about texturing and lighting. But yeah, basically, what I do is different because you have to, like, with cinematography and video editing, which I've done a lot of, which I'm sure we'll get into. Like, a lot of times you'll do stuff like add film grain, you'll, add like imperfections. Sometimes you'll add camera shake in post if you shot it on a tripod and you want it to look, natural or something like that. Um, Basically, I sort of think of texturing like that, like all those different kind of layers. And I should have brought like a supplement or something that I might work with. Let me try and pick this up real quick. But like, a lot of people, if I asked you to like model something like this in 3D, you would see this shape and your eyes would really only register this shape. But like, let me see if my camera will focus. Look at all this
Oh yeah.
texture in here. That's like a bunch of different, and it's stuff you don't even think about until you're trying to create it in 3D. And you
Right.
make this shape and you're like, this doesn't look real at all. And so then you have to get into like imperfections and you have to get into all different kinds of accurate textures, and it's a fun world. It's a fun world. It's like the reason that I shifted from like uh video editing and cinematography to this is because this feels limitless to me. And I know that like video editing is as well. But this was just more exciting to me. So that was sort of how I got into it.
Well, that's really awesome. I love the way that the stuff looks. You seem to have a little bit of a niche, at least what I've seen of your work. You seem
Yeah.
to work with like supplements, supplement companies, and basically 3D modeling or rendering their packaging and their products. Is
Yeah.
there other work that you do on top of that, or is that pretty much like your bread and butter?
That's my bread and butter, for sure. That's like probably 90% of what I've done for the last mm, 3 years, I would say. Um, I Yeah, so definitely mostly with supplement companies, starting to break out of that now, starting to do some different stuff. Still in CPG, consumer product goods. I am doing some stuff with a candle company, doing some stuff with some hydration companies, which I guess is kind of the same thing. But like, if you're familiar with like Liquid IV or Element Hydration or anything like
Yeah.
that, sort of that kind of world, it's a little bit different. It might seem like a small differentiation, but when you've been working with supplements for 3 years straight, it's anything different is welcome. Um, yeah, I guess that is most of what I do. Since I've been so deep in the supplement world, I have sort of gotten on on like the back end and doing some administrative stuff in that world. So I do some stuff outside of creative as far as like helping brands concierge basically their whole startup within that space now. But yeah, it's my passion is still just the animating and all that.
When you say concierge with these brands, what do you mean exactly by that?
Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into um having a supplement brand. A lot of stuff that people often don't really think about. I mean, like with any company, I guess, but like I helped a major company. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Mentality brand. They're really big on social media. They post like um, all kinds of like really hardcore, intense motivational quotes, and like they do a lot of like the edits of like the Goggins type people, stuff like that. And so they're getting into some performance supplements. And so I helped them concierge their basically their whole startup in supplements. And they thought that it would be easier than doing apparel, and they were sorely mistaken, and we were like 4 months delayed in getting everything done. But basically on the back end of the supplement industry, there's like label design, label printing, there's manufacturing, formulation, there's compliance, there's you have to go through several different legal departments to get things done, and then you have to trademark specifically within dietary supplements. It's a whole big process, and so I've been on every step of that process at one point or another, and so now I can kind of walk people through it. Um,
Hmm.
and so that's sort of become something that I don't really do intentionally, but people come to me for content, and I'm like, have you done this laundry list of other things that you need to do? And they're like, no, how do we do that? And so that's sort of just how it goes.
That's really cool that you've sort of, I mean, not only have you niched down to some degree, but also you've expanded the services you offer within that niche.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, it's been a wild 3 years, but it's been interesting to say the least. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me a little bit of. I mean, you've already mentioned that you're from Huntsville, but tell me a little bit of just who you are, and I guess I'll go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and skip to the next slide as well, and just sort of tell me about your journey. I want to know like where did you start? How did you get involved in like the creative sort of field in general? And then how
Yeah.
did you end up getting on these on the actual 3D rendering stuff that you do now?
Yeah. So, my story might be sort of similar to several people my age. I know that I've met people in the 3D world, especially that have a similar story to me. But I got started with creative stuff back when like sniping clans were a big thing in like video games.
Yes.
If you know
Yes.
what I'm
Okay.
talking about, like
I,
FaZe Clan and Optic back when they used to make sniping montages.
yes.
Um,
Yes.
that's where I started. And so I did graphic design, I did video editing with video game footage, all that kind of stuff. And even, back then I kind of dabbled in 3D. So this was when I was like 10, 11, 12,
Wow.
like super, super young. And so I even like dabbled some with 3D back then because there were this is like crazy to even attempt to rehash, but like when you were editing like gaming footage and trying to put together like a montage of stuff, there was this, well, I guess I say this thing called motion tracking, but you know what motion tracking is, where you would go and try to put 3D text in what was called a cinematic, which was just like you would go into theater mode and turn off all the HUD and like just get like a raw clip of the map, and you would try to like 3D track text into that. um it was a whole thing, and like there's gonna be like one person who watches this interview who knows what I'm talking about, but um
Was that in the video game itself?
which part?
Oh, the part of actually like, I guess getting this simple render or simple video map that you were then
So
mapping in a 3D.
in some games it was, yeah. So like generally you make montages in multiplayer games, and some of those have what's called a theater mode, where you can go back and watch matches you've played, like download and watch
Right.
previous matches you've
Yeah.
played and like see different things from different perspectives, stuff like that. Turn off the HUD. So yeah, you could just do that and like free cam through the map basically. And yeah, it's sort of like taking a drone shot, and you would take that and then try to 3D track text into it. Um, so, I mean, that was probably like the first 3 or 4 years of me being creative, was just trying to like find different ways to be involved in that, watching, hundreds of hours of tutorials, frying my mother's laptop, trying to like use After Effects and Cinema 4D, cracked versions of After Effects and Cinema 4D at the time, CS5. And I don't even know what version of Cinema 4D, but like, um, yeah, that was like, that's sort of the origin story. Um, and I don't know if there's anywhere specific you want to lead from there, but
Well, tell
um,
me, at what point did you start making money doing it?
I didn't make any money really until I was in high school, really like my junior and senior year. By this time I was doing videography. So I got I sort of took my interest from all that stuff, mainly video editing, really. And I had not certainly not stopped playing video games, but I had slowed down a lot and was doing a lot more socially in high school. And we got assigned like a couple video projects, and I like my friends knew, some of them also did what I did, but my friends knew that I was interested in this stuff, so I was the leader of the video projects. And that was really my first experience with cameras, and so I knew I could do the editing part, and then it was up to me to learn um, how to use cameras. And so we did some like regular video projects, but we also did some music videos, some like cinematic music videos. And it was a fun time in high school. Just like I basically just played around all the time. Um, and I didn't yeah, I didn't start making money with it until I was sort of later in high school, junior and senior year, shooting music videos for local artists, doing, you know, some small event type stuff. Yeah.
What about what about after high school? What was your path? I mean, you know, I would imagine there was probably some expectations from your parents that you would either go into like a more traditional workforce or go into college. What was the expectation, and then what was the reality of that time?
The expectation and the reality sort of ebbed and flowed with one another. You know, like I think my parents handled all of that extremely well. Um, you know, they really pushed for me to have a plan and like have a traditional, you know, like good parents would. So I did one semester, I guess I did like 2 semesters at the University of Alabama. Um, and I was just in the business school, just sort of like, you know, I knew I wanted to do the video stuff and I knew that I could make money with it, but I wasn't making a lot of money. You know, I wasn't making like, I was making a living for a college kid, but not for like an adult. Um, like I knew and they knew that there was potential, but you know, probably useful to learn some other skills alongside it, maybe some business.
I want to talk specifically about some of your work. I want to hear from you. Like, what's some of your favorite things to do in the 3D kind of rendering space? And let me know, am I using the right terms? I mean, if I just say 3D modeling or 3D rendering, is that what I call the type of work you do?
Yeah, so I'm what you call a 3D generalist. So you can use basically all of those terms. You know, I I call myself a motion designer because most of what I do is people asking me to animate stuff. Um, so that's why I use the term motion designer. But people, you know, people call me 3D artist. They call me a rendering artist. Some people call me a product designer. I'm certainly not that, but people use all kinds of stuff. But I'm technically what's known as a 3D generalist, meaning I do everything. Like in big pipelines, you know, there's like a lighting specialist, and there's like a camera F curves specialist. Like really, if in big pipelines, you get really down into the minutia of this stuff. But I'm called a generalist, so 3D artist is probably an accurate
Okay.
term.
One thing I did want to touch back on is because we got up to where you were out of high school, you went to college, you said for a couple of semesters at the University of Alabama. How did you get from where you were doing? I'm assuming you were mostly still at that point doing video type work with traditional use of camera and editing. How did you go from that to
Yeah.
doing the kind of work you do now?
Yeah. Yeah. So I did video for a long time, or at least what felt like a long time. Like, obviously, I think it was professionally, it was probably a span of about 3 years, but I did a lot in that 3 years. I I sort of hustled my way through the video scene. And this is where my like sparse online presence will sort of get you. And you probably would rather have a little more work to pull from, and I would know where to find it, but you probably wouldn't. But so post high school, did 1 or 2 years, or did 1 or 2 semesters rather, at Alabama, was still doing video that whole time. While I was doing, and when I say video, I was doing like I did a sorority recruitment video. I did event videos at bars in Tuscaloosa, a lot of like stuff like that. Um, Sort of alongside that, oh no, that was later actually. Um, to go back for
Yeah.
1 second to like the relationship me and my parents had through all of this. I had mentioned that they like, I thought they handled it well. They really pushed me to like do some of the traditional stuff and like have a real plan and a vision for what this could be. Like, we all knew that there was potential for the creative stuff to make money, but without a vision and just like playing around on my computer, occasionally getting distracted by video games, it wasn't really um setting itself up to be everything that it could be. So that was sort of their role. And so I was sort of pushing back against that at every chance I could. So I've sort of like weaved in and out of school and work and all kinds of stuff like that. So my first semester at Alabama, which is like true freshman first semester, in the dorms, I was doing as much video work as I could. Did some stuff at bars, did all kinds of stuff. Ended up submitting a reel to this guy up in Huntsville named Colin Wayne, who was an influencer who owned a steel company, a steel decor company. And I ended up getting a job with him, and I met somebody named Austin, who has given me tons of opportunities since then, like through all of my different um, avenues of stuff: video editing, photo, graphic design, and even into 3D stuff. He's given me stuff there. But my actual time with that influencer in Huntsville was pretty short lived. And after that, I went to work for an agency in Huntsville called Rocket City
Yeah.
Digital. Have
Yeah.
you ever
Yeah.
seen their
They've
work?
they've
Yeah.
got one of their video
Um,
guys is I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it's been a while since I've looked at their stuff, but one of their video guys is really impressive with some of his edit. But
yeah,
I think I've discovered them through some of your stuff. Did you
maybe
do
so.
drone work?
If you've been following me since, yeah,
Okay, maybe it was drone work
yeah,
that I saw you do with them.
yeah, 2019 was when I was with them, and I did maybe very early in 2020. No, not even, because it would have just been late 2018, early 2019 that I would have been with Rocket City Digital. But I got to do all kinds of stuff there, and I learned. That was where I learned like a lot of my stuff about lighting, and like actually started learning camera work. I had done a lot since then, but in more of a production environment. Um, that was when I started learning some of that stuff. And the reason I mention that is it's important because in 3D, in like what I do now, everything I learned prior is applicable. So like all of the camera stuff, composition, focal lengths, aperture, shutter speed, all of it applies even in 3D space. And in 3D space, you can break the rules, but having the foundation of knowing cameras is like a huge thing. And it's why there's such a wide gap in, or not a wide gap, there's a wide, I think the spectrum of people who try 3D is way wider than the spectrum of people that try anything else. And like the main things that separate people who are really good from people who are like, there can be somebody who's like incredibly talented at like doing and putting together like vector-based systems, like physical, like math-based simulation systems, but they can't like make them look good because they don't know anything about lighting or cameras or composition or anything like that. So that's why I sort of say that, it was really important, even all the video stuff that I did before. So yeah, I did. I had my stint with Rocket City Digital, and then I went back to school. So this is the second semester now. We have 2 broken up semesters. And while I was doing that, that was peak COVID. So that was early 2020. I moved back to Tuscaloosa probably in January. Everything got shut down in like March or whenever it was. I don't even remember. But while I was there, I founded a sports videography page that was called Ball Game. Still is called Ball Game. I ended up selling it eventually. And so I traveled like all over the Southeast shooting high school basketball.
I had
Do you remember any of this?
completely forgot about this, man. I do remember
Me too,
this.
until I'm like prompted to bring it up.
Say that again.
Me too, until I'm prompted to bring it up.
What it was called?
I always
what was
forget
it
about
called
it.
again?
Ball Game.
And this is still out
Yeah,
there,
it's
right?
just at Ball Game on Instagram. Yeah, somebody else owns it. I don't even know who owns it now. It's been through like 2 other hands. So yeah, that was Ball Game was when I got like really kind of popular at creative stuff. I was always kind of like sneaky good, but then Ball Game was when I got like a lot of attention because I brought hoop mixtapes had been a thing for like forever, but I brought them into After Effects and like lit stuff on fire and did all kinds of like tastefully well done effects that had no business being in a hoop mixtape. And now that's like par for the course.
Right.
But like, not to pat myself on the back or anything, but I was involved in starting that trend.
I'm trying right now. I've got it pulled up, and I was trying to go back to when you were doing it, but they have like unloaded a lot of stuff on here. I mean, I'm only 46 weeks back, which I think that's not far enough back to be at your stuff, right?
No, definitely not. But you probably won't have to scroll for too much longer. But yeah, these videos were.
I do now remember watching this because I think this was, you said basically around 2020, 2019, 2020. So I remember I was working for the school system, doing the job I do now, which is just digital media for Shelby County Schools, and I was always researching like what kind of videos could we make for high school sports or especially hype videos. Actually, I wasn't in my current role. I was actually at Calera High School teaching marketing, and we were doing hype videos for all the different sports and organizations. And I do remember specifically looking at Ball Game and following Ball Game at the time, and
so
seeing the stuff
so you
were
followed
doing.
me through a couple of Instagram accounts too.
Say that again.
I said you followed me through a couple of Instagram accounts too, then, because I've erased myself from the internet a couple of times.
That's funny. Am I at you now? This is still 2022.
You've got to be close.
When did you get out of it entirely?
Well, but it was idle for a long time though. There's probably some stuff of mine even in 2021, maybe.
Still 2022. But I do remember, and I don't know. Here we go.
This is me, yeah. Yeah, so this was all the kind of stuff that I was doing.
I don't think I ever put together you with Aaron Wilhite sharing an office, doing 3D modeling, and Ball Game. I even saw the logo on the shirt that I just had up on the screen a little while ago. Let's see. Yeah, this right here, that middle photo. I saw that logo and I recognized it, but I didn't even put it together.
Yeah, it's been a long 6 years. I've crammed a lot into this. Um, I've had like 3 different careers, each of which has lasted about 2.5 years, and been like complete, like, same vein, but like same vein, same energy, but completely different as far as technical stuff goes. It's been a long, long, long 5 or 6 years.
That's really cool, man. I mean, it's neat to make these connections. I mean, for you, obviously, you lived them, but I've followed you for a while, and I'm sorry that I didn't connect the dots, so to speak. Uh, actually,
Yeah,
I
no,
should
that's
blame
fine.
you. You
I
should
just
have connected
randomly
your
have
dots
like,
better.
that's true. That's true. I mean, there's a whole, like, my battle with the internet notoriety part of this whole thing is like a whole story in and of itself. But yeah, so I mean, ball game kind of leads straight into the 3D stuff.
Yeah.
That was, those two things sort of like coincided. Like my my second semester of school and ball game happened simultaneously, and then the tail end of ball game and learning 3D and even getting my first like client in supplements happened simultaneously. So like there's a lot of overlapping timelines here.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. I was at the same time. I was also watching some of your ball game stuff. I mean, do you still
No, that's
do you
fine.
still do any of like camera video work? Um,
No, I blew dust off my camera to do this interview.
wow. Okay. Hey, the
Yeah.
the work you do now. Whenever we talk about like the obviously the 3D modeling, the 3D rendering, obviously that stuff is really impressive and I would imagine very valuable to your clients. How many
Yeah.
clients do you work with right now currently?
I mean, I have a couple that I probably have like 4 to 5 that I consider like partners. Like I work with them constantly and I'm like their go-to guy for a lot of different things. Like, even outside of the 3D, like I do some of their design, I do like email SMS, I do web building, all that kind of stuff. Um the 3D takes up like 80% of the time, but there is like all of those other things. So probably like 4 or 5 that I consider like true level um partner level clients. But then like as far as total, I'll have projects running alongside those. So at any given time, like it's probably 6 to 8 total different people, clients, whatever you want to call them, I'm working with.
Have you ever looked at growing your brand or your company beyond just you?
I have, but I've done some soul searching, and I don't have the desire to. I don't care to I don't care to manage people, and I don't really care to even go through the process of hiring someone else to manage people. Um, I just like making stuff, and usually my experience working in pipelines has been like, and I've worked with some like crazy talented people who definitely do things like top tier, like zero question about it. Like Tyler Morgan, the guy you're
Yes.
talking about from Rocket
Yeah.
City Digital, he was like, even back then when we were working together, he was like top tier video editor. Um, but I just can't. I like to have my, generally when I'm doing something, it's because somebody wants my style on it. So me like working in a pipeline with other people is generally pretty
Mm.
clunky. It's like I just work better alone, I think.
Yeah. Does that feel
um,
isolating to you at times, or is that just sort of your personality and that actually energizes you to be sort of? I mean, I think of people that are like extrovert versus introvert, and I'm not necessarily trying to identify you as one of those, but just in general, do you find yourself like wishing you at least had? I mean, at one point you shared an office with Aaron. So I'm assuming there was some
Yeah.
mutual benefit, not just simply in sharing the bill, but also in sharing the space and having a creative conversation potentially.
Yeah, conversations for sure. I love getting coffee with people. I'll just go and work like in coffee shops. Laptops aren't really at a place where they're great at 3D
Right.
work, but luckily there are some great RDP solutions that allow working remotely on this massive machine that's to my left. Um, I love creative energy. Just keep it off my projects. I, I just
Yeah.
and that's generally not even and I am for sure an introvert, and I am generally energized by doing my projects solo. But that's also like there's an added benefit in there that's generally to my clients' benefit because they want my style anyways. A lot of this work that you have on the screen, just like two artists couldn't put the same stuff together. At least not with how niched down I am in this stuff. Yeah, I guess that's sort of my
Do
answer
you
there.
feel like you do you see a time when you would almost tap out your creativity with this kind of work, or do you feel like it's limitless, like the options? I mean, you've already talked about how 3D space is really limitless in what you can do. Do you see any kind of times, or have you run into roadblocks before where you're like, man, I just maybe you feel like you've exhausted all of your creative options at least at times?
I feel like that. Yeah, I mean, I go through like two massive phases of burnout a year where I feel like I genuinely believe like, God, I couldn't do another video about a pre-workout. Like they're all the same. It doesn't like, there's no difference. And I'm just coming out of one of those right now. I've had like 3 weeks of really good work the last several weeks. And so like it really is just the medium, and it's why the medium of 3D excites me because it is limitless. Like I don't think there's a niche boring enough that you couldn't use 3D to make it interesting again.
Yeah. What is there something that's just your favorite thing to make? Like, is there an element of maybe some of these things that you've done that you're like, man, that like every time I go back and do that, it just excites me, or I just think it's really cool.
Um Generally, I would say that is my passion for that is actually environment building, which doesn't lend itself to project product animation like super naturally. But I also think it's part of why I've been successful is because somebody comes to me and they say, I want to put my product on a spaceship in space and then I want it to blast down to Earth like One Punch Man. And I'm like, I'll figure out a way to make that happen. Um, yeah, I guess world building, environment building, and both of those are big parts of storytelling. I do all kinds of work. So I do the stuff that's on like infinite backgrounds, which is generally what you think of when you think of like product animation. But I enjoy sort of building a world around a product, either by myself or collaboratively with the client, and just bringing life to something that shouldn't have this much life. Like this is just a cylinder with a label on it. Why is it? Why is it on a
Yeah,
spaceship?
yeah.
That's what's really interesting to me about
All
it.
right. So before I move on from talking about your work, at least in with this slide we've got, I want to ask you because a lot of the work that I do for the school system, it involves like interview type stuff. And I feel usually pretty safe in the world of AI now. And because I'm like, well, AI can't create an interview with this teacher talking about this school or this student talking about this teacher. But so much of like product stuff, I feel like people are sort of seeing like what can AI do, or 3D rendering, whether it's people or products. How do you see AI in your work, either as a competitor possibly, or as an asset, as a tool?
Yeah. I think it's a long time in my space before it's a genuine competitor. And that's generally because of how specific, like, the actual models that I work with are. Like, if a client, say you're working on a shoe with Nike, like that shoe has to be the shoe that somebody would
Right,
buy. And AI is not great at working with very specific things yet. Um, Maybe it will someday. Maybe we're not even far off from
right.
that. Who knows? It feels to me like it's a long way from being a competitor to me. It's definitely an asset, mostly in the world of image generation. So I have some clients that are like specifically lower budget that I've just helped out for forever. And so a lot of times what I'm doing for them is taking, like, rather than actually building an environment, I'm taking their product and I'm surrounding it with basically images on planes. So it's not like really 3D objects, but you can sort of mimic 3D space, or not even mimic, it is 3D space, but you're basically playing tricks on
It's
the
an
mind.
optical illusion.
Um, sort of it is. And I use AI all the time to generate those backgrounds and like those like mid-level assets that are going to be out of focus that don't have to be super
Right.
specific. Um, so it's already been an asset in that sense. There are a lot of like AI 3D modeling tools popping up, like text to 3D model
Right.
generators. Those are pretty bad in my experience. But I'm also generally, like I said, my work is very stylized for the same reason I can't work with other people. I can't work with
Yeah.
AI because I can't get it to be exactly how I want it to be. So for certain things, it's an asset. For most things, it's way far off from being useful or competitive, at least in my
Yeah,
field.
yeah. Well, I mean, more and more, I think people are realizing like, all right, it's useful in these ways, but it's very limited in these ways. I think AI will definitely improve. I mean, we are looking at the worst version of all of these different AI tools. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
it'll do nothing but improve, but it'll be interesting to see how quickly or not so quickly those improvements happen. And in general, I think the creative space, for the most part, AI is going to be an asset and not like a job killer. Um, I do think there's
Yeah.
probably ways that will be job killer, but I don't think it's going to be in like the video and photography space, that some people, I guess, imagine it to be sometimes.
Yeah. The way that I've sort of looked at it thus far is that artists will always be safe. Um, People who have vocations that involve them making art who aren't really artists, they might be in some trouble.
Yeah.
But I think that the artist will always have its place. I don't think that computers can do what a real creative person does.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. I mean, obviously there's uniqueness. Even you think about like the perfection that so much stuff, even cameras are at now with the image quality. But then you even talked about earlier how so many times we put textures and grit and
Yeah.
dirt and
Yeah. You take your
imperfections.
4K video and you put you take your 4K video and you try to emulate a Super 8
Right.
camera with it. Like, you're actively trying to make the camera worse
Right.
now because you have to get something stylized out of it because, you know, Billy down the street can go buy an A7 IV or an A7S III and, you know, output the cleanest image the world's ever seen.
Right.
So, like, you know, you got to make stuff
Yeah. I
interesting.
think humans will always probably figure out ways to fight against the perfection of a computer to some degree. So, all right.
Yeah,
So I
I
do want
agree.
to ask you if, I mean, based on your experience in this space, what would you say to somebody that was just getting started or maybe just still in like a beginning phase of learning the 3D modeling and Cinema 4D and other software like that or Blender? If somebody's wanting to break into it or just beginning to, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to it earlier. Learn cameras and learn lighting. Do it in the real world if you can, but even if you can't, don't worry about complex 3D scenes. Just put a simple object and a camera and some lights in your scene and play around with the settings like crazy. Watch, if you can't afford a camera, watch videos about cameras, learn about focal lengths, watch videos about lenses and gear and aperture and shutter speed. Those fundamentals, if you know the fundamentals of what makes a piece of art good, then all you have to do is stack a little bit, a lot, a bit of technical ability on top of it, and you're fine. But like, once you've learned, I mean, artistic principles apply regardless of medium. And that was massive going from video to 3D. But even, you know, if you're a painter, it applies to photography. If you're, and vice versa, and like all of those things translate. And so composition, cameras, lenses, color, lighting, if you know those things going into trying 3D art, then really the only thing that you're going to be learning is the technical aspects of the programs, which is really deep in the 3D world. They are not easy pieces of software to learn. You know, I think a lot of filmmakers are intimidated by After Effects or like Fusion in Resolve, and 3D is like that, but like top down. Like everything you do is that
Yeah,
complicated.
yeah. You talk about learning the basics. Those basics like camera stuff, like lighting or aperture, shutter speed, ISO, like the way that those things work together, or focal lengths. Those are things that you go back 50 years with, SLRs, before the digital age of cameras. You still have like those same principles apply. And I think no matter how far we go into the future with cameras or with 3D modeling, those principles will still apply. So I think it's
Yeah.
hugely important for people to learn those. And I don't think you can ever finish learning those too. I mean, whether it's just using a focal length in a different way, or even like I think of the psychology of focal lengths whenever you start getting into that stuff, or even color theory. I mean, there's so much of the science behind the creative work that I feel like just applies to every field of it. That if you just start learning those things, it's going to make you a better artist, a better storyteller, a better, some cases, seller of products, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
cool.
All of those things apply. Yeah. The most translatable thing is usually the most useful thing to learn.
That's a good truth right there. I like that. I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
cut that part out and put it on Instagram.
Nice. Yeah, that'll be a good one.
All right. So tell me what's next for you. What I mean, is there a whole nother line of work you're going to go into now since you've transitioned so many different times? Are you planning on jumping back into YouTube? Because I imagine your fan base. Because I mean, you've got 30,000 views on some of these videos. I mean, most of these videos have in the tens of thousands at least. Uh, what's next for you in general?
Yeah, good question. Well, I've felt like, believe it or not, like even though each year I get like progressively more successful in my career or whatever, I also feel progressively more scattered. And so I'm currently I'm trying to simplify my workflow, trying to simplify um my life really in general. I've felt pretty like I haven't had a chance to slow down for a long time. And so while I'm not really looking to slow down the pace of my work per se, um I'm doing a lot of like soul searching and trying to figure out like, okay, I've explored every organization system there is. I've explored every project management system there is. I've tried to be efficient in every single possible way. And a lot of times that takes me out of the creative part of anything that I do. And I'm trying to just get back to doing what works and doing what feels best really at any given time. And generally that is what's simplest, even if like maybe something I've read somewhere or heard on a podcast says that it might not be what's best. I'm trying to get back to just doing what feels good. And at the moment, that's leading me towards simplifying my tech stack. So, like, the video that you were playing earlier, I was working in Blender, and I've tried to force myself to use and be efficient in Blender for a long time, like on and off. And I just am not as good in it as I am in Cinema 4D, which is my main uh, 3D DCC. And so I'm just like I'm just letting go of trying to be efficient in Blender. And it's led to 3 weeks of like really inspiring work these last couple weeks. There are some things that I would like to learn that I don't think would lead me to an entirely different like career path, like some of the previous things I have. Um, there is a piece of software called Houdini
Yeah.
that like, do you know Michael Sutherland?
The name, where is that an Alabama based person?
I actually have no idea if he still is. I think he is, but he's like the most talented 3D artist that I know of that's come out of Alabama. He's done work with like Man vs. Machine and like crazy, crazy 3D. I do think he's still Birmingham based, actually. I think I looked recently, but he's a Houdini specialist. And the stuff that he does is just insane. Like, where you look at what I do and are like, what am I looking at? I look at what he does and I'm like, what am I looking at? And that's with all of the previous experience that I have. So, there are some things that I would like to get into, but like he works in the same space as me. Like he works in consumer packaged goods doing product animation. It's just a whole different vein.
Is this him?
So
It says composer at okay,
no,
okay. So um not him. Let's see.
yeah,
I'm just curious if I can even find this guy.
his Instagram username is I am
I
Sutherland.
am or I am?
I am,
Ah,
yeah, giving you more people to try to interview.
yeah. Hang on. I've got is it one word or is it underscores?
Yes, it's one word. Do we have a chat? We do have a chat. I should be able to link it to you.
Yeah, I'm not finding. I found a Jamie.
Interesting. So I'm going to put it in our chat right now. That's his website, and you should be able to find his socials from there, I assume. but he has done some work with Telegraph. He works like in the same general vicinity as me, but he is better than me and works with bigger brands on bigger projects. He works in pipelines, which I don't really do, but he's a Houdini specialist, and I would like to learn some Houdini.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some stuff I think that you've put out about Houdini, but I haven't myself
Probably.
actually ever stepped into that world.
Yeah, I know some basics. I know some basics. I know how to do some cool stuff, but I've never done like a full project from start to finish in it. And it's a heavy, heavy, heavy software. Like where Cinema 4D and Blender might be heavy to learn for someone coming from the video world, Houdini is heavy even for someone with a lot of experience in
Yeah,
3D.
yeah.
Um,
I'm sorry. I've got a couple of kids right outside my door right now.
oh, that's
My
fine.
children as well as my nephews, I think, just came to my house, and so
No
it's getting a
worries.
little bit noisy out there. Okay, so I was my next I guess question was going to be who inspires you. It sounds like this Michael Sutherland is one that that inspires you, and would be somebody that you would probably recommend me potentially reaching out to for a future episode. Is there
Yeah, yeah, most
is there
definitely.
someone else that you might recommend in addition, maybe one or two other people that are local, either to Birmingham or just to Alabama in general? I know we talked about some people up in the Huntsville area that you've worked with. I just didn't know if any of those might be good ones that you'd recommend for me to touch base with.
Yeah, there's one. Um, I wouldn't say so. I've been doing 3D longer than this kid Isaiah. I think Isaiah is a little younger than me, but he graduated from UAH. He's doing a lot of 3D motion design. He's from Huntsville, and he just moved out to Texas to Dallas, I believe, to do. I don't know what he's doing. He may be doing an apprenticeship. He may be doing studio work. But yeah, he works in sort of the same vein as Michael and I. We're really the only three from Alabama that I know of. There obviously are others,
Right?
but I think Dustin mentioned somebody on his episode that he did with you that does VFX stuff. But these are the I've only ever interacted with Michael and Isaiah. So they're definitely both worth reaching out to. Um,
It's really
there are,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I was saying it's really amazing thinking of some of these product videos that you and other people that do similar create, because I think of so many what it like Daniel Schaefer. These like where they'll put a product on like a stick basically, and they spin it in front of like a
Yeah.
TV screen or something to get sort of basically like a similar thing, and then they'll composite other pieces or green screen out some stuff.
Yeah.
It's wild. I guess those two worlds, just the similarities, but then also again that freedom that you have whenever you're working in a 3D space that you can literally make anything. Right? That's
Yeah.
it's really neat. I think it's cool what y'all do. And
We obviously have fun with it.
yeah, it blows my mind. And again, the software, when I watch your videos, the software just blows me away. Every time I watch something, I'm like, I just can't even scratch the surface of it right now. But I'm sure it's just like anything else. When I first stepped into Premiere Pro, it was like, oh my goodness, like what are all these windows and how am I ever going to figure that
Yeah.
out? Or even After Effects with dealing with expressions, it's like, how am I ever going to actually understand what an expression is?
Hmm.
But the more you do that stuff, the more it becomes just
Yeah.
like any other tool.
And that's expressions with After Effects brings up a good point as far as, the whole like 3D is limitless thing. There is a massive part of 3D design, and it's built into all these softwares like knowing how to code, which I don't know at all, opens up an entirely different space within 3D of being able to do those things that I was talking about with doing like real, vector math simulation, basically, where I don't even know enough about it to be able to describe it accurately to you. I feel like Michael, if anybody from Alabama knows about it, it's probably Michael. Houdini uses its own programming language called Vex, like literally is only made for / used in Houdini, and it's so deep. It's so deep, the rabbit hole of 3D visual effects. So to I guess to sort of wrap that back to the original question about what's next for me, I want to get out of being administrative and get out of some of these ancillary things that I'm doing in the supplement space and get back to improving creatively.
Hmm.
It's been a long time. My head has been too cluttered to improve for like the last, feels like about a year and a half. And so starting that journey of getting back to that within the last 3 weeks, like I said, been doing some good work. A lot of which I'll share. I've had like a big battle with my history of doing social media / putting out work, because I really don't enjoy, first of all, I don't like knowing what other people are doing, and I don't like them to know what I'm doing. I just like to sort of sit back and do cool stuff and have people see it, even, not even necessarily have my name on it. There's a ton of my work on like my client's Instagram that's just floating out there that doesn't have any actual direct connection to me, um, which is kind of how I like to be. So, but I am starting to put together a body of work. You pulled a lot of stuff today from my first Behance project that I put out a couple days ago, I guess like a week ago now,
Yeah.
maybe. Um, and so I'm starting to sort of collect some of my projects into that. I do want to get back into YouTube. I do want to put out work so that there is a collection of my stuff somewhere. Um, but I sort of want to not disconnect it from me, but I don't want to be involved in social media at all personally.
Well,
So that's sort of that's as part of, this is like a very long sort of drawn out what's next for me. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
Well, as a fan of your work, and especially a fan of some of those like behind the scenes kind of elements to it, I do look forward to anything that you end up sharing out. I definitely am going to follow that Behance and keep an eye out
Yeah.
for that. But at the same time, I also totally respect the drain that that kind of stuff can be on sometimes our own creative process or just life outside of the creative process. You know what I mean? Like so many
Yeah.
times sharing or re-editing stuff to share, or even sometimes the posting and then the anticipation of what happens after that. All of that can
Yeah.
be very draining and sort of attention sucking, so to speak. So
Yeah.
I totally respect the idea of you not doing that, if or at least limiting the amount that you do that. But I also look forward to when you decide to put some stuff out.
Yeah, I've got like I mentioned, a lot of the work from the last couple weeks I've already sort of started compiling into some of those projects. So I'm sort of just going to sort of operate, I guess, as a studio. Like I just want to put out work. I'll put out some behind the scenes. I'll keep doing some tutorials on YouTube, I hope. Um, Unfortunately, now a lot of my audience is for a program that I've sort of divorced myself from, but hopefully the stuff that I do is still applicable. I'll probably shift more into a lot of the questions that I got on my YouTube was about like how to build business in 3D. So I'll probably shift more into
Yeah.
that. Um, and rather than quite so program specific. and then I'll do some like from that I'll do, once you get a project, how to like go about it. I'll do like full project breakdowns. Once something's done, I'll like go back to the beginning and sort of walk through the whole thing without doing like a tutorial that's software
Yeah.
dependent. So that's sort of, I guess that's the bigger what's next. That's the stuff that I would like to do.
That's cool. Well, and I look forward to, ball game 2.0 whenever you start doing that's some
Maybe once
hustling, man. That kind of work. That's you got to grind to get that kind of stuff going.
Yeah. Well, luckily at that time, I mean, it all kind of lined up. There were just some outstanding players. And I mean, there always are, but at that time especially, like there were some outstanding players in the Southeast. So I could go over to Atlanta, I could go down to, Tuscaloosa or like some random places in Alabama, and there were like NBA level talent there. Like my phone is full of like random like basketball players that are now in the NBA.
That's cool.
Like I have so many other contact, like haven't talked in years, probably will never talk again, but just, you don't delete contacts. So
Not on purpose.
yeah,
I've had it
no.
accidentally happen.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the ball game thing was interesting and I had a lot of fun with it, but
Well,
yeah, definitely more lucrative what I'm doing
I
now.
totally get that, but it was really fun to watch, and I'm really thankful for this conversation. I know you said early on that you were like, I don't know what he's going to ask, but it's really neat just to get to know, especially some of the origin stories of some creators, and in your case, man, being able to connect some dots that have been sort of floating out there in two different worlds. Just sort of seeing how I have been following you for a while, and seriously, your work is incredible. What I've seen of it, and I can only imagine that it's going to get even more and more incredible as you sort of find your I guess your flow, so to speak, in what you're doing now. So that's cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely appreciate the opportunity to come on and speak. Having conversations. I mean, I am extremely introverted, so I don't have these conversations very often, and so you can see me kind of like restructuring my like neural understanding of some of even my own timelines like in real time here. So I'm sure as a listener, it probably wasn't extremely cohesive, but we did cover a lot of ground and I have a lot of overlapping timelines. So there's some confusion that can't really be helped there. But yeah, this was fantastic. We'll have to get coffee sometime.
I would love to, man. Definitely. I just got coffee this morning with Alex Kiker. Do you know Alex?
Nice. I've met Alex 2 or 3 times. I haven't seen any of the guys since I've been back in Birmingham. I've been meaning to get together with Dustin and Aaron and Harrison. I don't know Alex or Jacob quite as well, but I've met everybody that's like around before. So yeah, it's been good, and I'd like to get back connected with everybody.
Well, I don't know if right now I don't know if this will come out before this or it may come out just right after this. But man, if you can, I would love for you to save the date for July 18th. It's going to be from 6 to 9 p.m. I'm actually going to do a meetup in Hoover at Brock's Gap Brewery. And if you're able to be there, I would love for you to be there. I'll be providing food and drinks to at least 30 people, if not, maybe more. But but anyway,
Nice.
I'm inviting the creatives in and around the Birmingham area to just come out and hang out. I'm not trying to sell people on anything. It's just going to be. There will be
You're not selling me a course.
Do what?
You're not selling me a course
No,
or
not
a
at all.
retreat
Not
or
at all.
anything else?
No, there will be a demo. At least the Air 7 Media will have their car with like a moto crane on it with some probably really nice red camera on it. And that'll be there. But other than that, I'll have a food truck that I've paid for a certain number of meals out of, and drinks that'll be available to everyone that I've that we'll cover. And I say Air 7 Media and the Joy Collective are sponsoring it. But anyway, if you're
Nice.
able to,
Yeah, please text me the info. Yeah, text me the info, and I'd love to. I need to get out more, as we've discussed. So
well, it's
that's also as a part of disconnecting, or like, having a plan for like being active but disconnecting online. I would like to connect a lot more in person soon. So let's do it.
definitely. Well, if you can't make it for some reason, we'll definitely do coffee. But I'd love to see you if you're able
Sounds
to
good.
on July 18th, man. But I'll text you the details. Thank you so much, seriously,
Sounds
again
good.
for doing this. It's been a joy to just sort of hang out with you, and I don't think it's as confusing of an explanation of your story as you made it out to be. I thought it was really great and flowed well, in spite of a few technical difficulties that we run into. But I'll
Yes.
probably cut some
Yes,
of those
just a
out.
few. Yes, I've been glancing up at my recording, but we should be good. So yeah, thank you for having me. This was a good conversation. I appreciate
Yes,
it.
sir.